how professional will we be without our producer? That's the big question.
He's going to be, turning in his car or wherever he is, right now, going, no, don't do it.
Exactly. Can't wait.
You're the only one with the questions, John, right? And now that it's been recorded, I'm sure you won't take the mickey out of my double denim that I've got on. All right? As Lee said, maybe this is a homage to Bewitched launching their newest single, but everyone's going to be very happy because we're not going to sing that song and do the little dance. But maybe we will at Christmas time. Don't know. Depends how many likes we get.
Oh, yeah.
No one will like that, sure.
Well, I guess the advantage of podcasts is that they won't see your leg movements; they'll only see your arm movements anyway, Chris. So we only have to learn half the dance. Thanks for listening to Just About Managing. To stay up to date with new episodes, remember to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and discover what comes next on our LinkedIn page. Welcome to this week's Just About Managing podcast. This is Ex-Managers Questions number 2, because as always, we took far too much time answering them last week. We do hope you enjoyed them. So we're going to continue on that thread and vein today. And so I have some pre-submitted questions from our dedicated listeners, gentlemen. So I'll kick off with this first one, and we'll see where it goes from there, shall we?
Be short and concise, like we were last time, you mean?
Absolutely, yeah. Can't guarantee that, Lee. No.
So, right, question number 1. How do you deal with leaders who are very good work-wise but have low emotional intelligence? I call them robot leaders. Should organization utilize them for leadership roles with people aspects or more IC focus roles? I think that means individual contributor focus roles is the acronym translation there. So, got over to you, Lee. Come on, get us warmed up.
It's a good light question to get us started, isn't it? Do you know what? It's the first thing that springs to mind when I think about that question is, are organisations set up well structurally to allow people career paths without having to move into management at times? And I think that often is a challenge for people and for organisations. In that, I think we saw it in our sort of old workplace, and you'd reach a certain level, and the next expectation to get to that next level is then you're going to lead a team, or then you're going to move into management and then move into leadership. And we end up then, if we're not careful, taking these people who are great at, in my instance, at work in our environment, technical skills, and then pushing them into management, which is not their natural forte and their natural strengths. And possibly not even what they want to do at times, but they want to see that career progression in there. So I think there's that element of it. Now, what I think's great to see is just recently, actually, funny enough, I'd seen on LinkedIn, going back to HSBC now, they've now created individual contributor positions in the technology space that go right up to MD level.
Wow.
Where they're full-on technical people. And therefore, there's this career path now that allows people to stay very technical without necessarily needing to move into leadership and management to get up there. So I think that's one piece that stands out immediately to me in that space. Of going, all the organisations set up to support people from a career perspective without having to deviate in there.
And so I think in smaller organisations, obviously that's slightly more challenging, isn't it? In terms of, people end up sort of evolving in their career within their organisation, and actually by default take on a broader set of responsibilities. So it becomes as challenging in terms of, okay, you've got someone who is very good work wise, but actually that emotional intelligence is lacking, and it can cause at times frustration or friction, but equally it's the tooling around actually navigating around that whilst being cognizant of that the emotional intelligence. You can obviously, we've had conversations about this before, is something you can develop, but you've got to want to develop and actually lean into that, and that's a real challenge as well, because I think, going back to the question, as an employee, you can't go to your manager, you're shit at emotional intelligence, you need to go and read this book or go on that course. There's, you've got to try and build out those techniques to try and support and help that person or work around them.
Yeah, well, you could say that to them. I'm not sure how it ends, but you could say that to them. But no, I think it's a great point. What's your thoughts on it, Chris?
Well, I think there's like two aspects here, right? There's the person on the working with or for the robot, and how can they cope with it? And then there's the robot themselves. Okay, it's just like really, really difficult. So, I guess overall, I mean, the first thing is no one is a finished article, whether it's the manager who's acting like that or the person who's got to cope with that change. And with all of the massive changes in the world, we're going to need, as society and as teams, to really embrace the different strengths in the team, right? Now, that more robotic, less empathetic leader might be actually really good at getting things done and maybe highly analytical and maybe more introverted, all right? So coming back to your earlier point, this is about putting the right people on the right things that they're good at. So they probably shouldn't be leading people if they're in that position. But this was more around, what was the question precisely, John?
How to deal with leaders who are very good work-wise but have low emotional intelligence.
So it's from that perspective of a subordinate working for somebody. Okay. That's a nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare, if I'm honest. All right. So first thing, when there's anything that's a nightmare, is to make sure you've got really
particularly it's a nightmare. Yeah, I think it's particularly a nightmare if you are higher on the scale of emotional intelligence as well, because you've got those barriers. Sorry, I interrupt you, Chris. Go on, keep going. You're in your flow.
Cool, right? So I think first thing is, if you're going to take on anything tricky, you've got to make sure you've got a really good support team and you're in charge of your own emotions. So first thing is, where's your head? Are you doing this from a position of just genuine trying to make things better, and is it aligned what you're going to try and do and say in line with the values of the organization to make the team stronger, rather than making this personal? All right, but this is difficult. So getting your support team in place, your support team of like mentors who've maybe been through this before or have faced up to those challenges, you can bounce stuff off. Maybe there's somebody in the organization or in and around the team who's really good at handling like difficult conversations. Go and getting some coaching off of them around how to do it. But like fundamentally, you're going to be unhappy.
Or listen to our podcast.
Well, or listen to Vince from about 3 podcasts ago, where we just go, yeah, Vince, you know what you're talking about. Yeah, him, right? So I think that whole support structure is really important. But fundamentally, this is always going to be a challenge. There's going to be something out there that you need to be brave enough to walk towards and deal with. And if you don't, you just kind of like restrict yourself and it won't be a good thing. So, personally, as a really short dated tip, I would remember the power of 3 in conversation, right? In terms of the power of that, the simplicity of it. You need to have a conversation with that manager. I would need to, personally, whether it would be career suicide or not, don't care, because actually there's more things to life than that specific job, right? And if you've got the skills, you've got to be brave enough to do what's right. And therefore, in that power of 3, admit that this is going to be, you'll feel uncomfortable about the conversation. give the feedback with specific examples and try and work together to work out a better way of communicating going forward. But you can only really do that if you've got the support network if it goes wrong. Yeah, but I mean, fundamentally, the chances that you can be working for that person forever and that organisation forever and in that role forever, you're not. So really, it's like you've got to be brave enough to take it on, but build up the support before you do. Yeah. That sounds nuts.
I think you're spot on,
No,
Steve.
but I am a bit nuts, right? So yeah, I think that's what you do, not ignore it.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on, Chris.
Go on, Lee. Go on. I was going to say just a little foil to what Chris is saying was, I think in this day and age, we culturally set a lot of expectations upon others in terms of behaviour norms that we expect ourselves. And I think there is a time to, whilst I do completely agree with what Chris is saying, I think there is actually a time and a place actually accepting that in terms of that person who is less emotionally intelligent, that they're operating within their boundaries that they understand and they're aware of. And there is a time and a place where you can actually adjust your own interaction style to marry with them, and you can achieve the same outcomes. Now, I think going to Chris's example, if the lack of emotional intelligence is impacting your ability to perform, then you do need to follow Chris's advice. If it's more that it just pisses you off and actually you find it frustrating work that way, consider adapting your own style to marry to them in those circumstances. You don't have to be like it all the time, but be a chameleon. Over to you, Lee.
I think all of it is great advice. The bit going back to your point, Chris, I think that two-sided piece of it of going, make sure you've got that support around you. So to your point, John, there, that may be then coaching for yourself into how you cope with those situations, that difficult manager or that robot manager with a low IQ, EQ, sorry. But you've got that support network. I think you're spot on there. The other bit, and this goes back to what you said there, Chris, as well with the Vince piece. I think it was Vince that said this and going, actually, the power of saying to someone, it's hard to have those conversations at times, particularly if it's someone above you and it's your manager. But that power of saying to somebody and opening the door of saying, is it okay if I give you some feedback? And asking permission to give that feedback. And then this is what I'm feeling with your leadership style. These are where the challenges are. So you start to open the door to that conversation. I agree. It's not an easy one at all. I think it's a very challenging one to have. But I think again, going back to Vince's points, it's sometimes you have to have those conversations. They're often some of the most rewarding ones when you have the difficult ones like that as well. But I do, again, I agree with you, John, as well. It's that getting that support around you as well that allows you then to vent, to air, to talk openly, and to understand how you can cater for different situations so that you're covered on all bases in a way.
There's a word of wisdom coming out of Chris. I can see by his raising his eyebrows there.
Word of wisdom. Blimey. Where's that going to come from? I don't know. The thing is that hopefully whoever's raised this question, it's brilliant that people are raising questions. So thank you for whoever's raised it. Is that things are going to get more complicated. Hopefully you'll continue to thrive and you will be more successful, but you will come across people who you don't necessarily gel with, and you'll be swimming in a different pool, potentially with more sharks that are more sneaky. So actually being able to deal with some of this stuff, better to get better at it now than to avoid all those difficult conversations and fall over later, right? So this is you never get to do everything with all the people you love. Right, it's never like that. So there is a maturity here. Coming back to your point, John, around is it you? What can you do? What can they do? But like fundamentally, if you're really unhappy and you've tried all that stuff, Yeah, have you really gone and had that honest conversation? That was a brilliant line, Lee, that you mentioned there, that Vince mentioned. That was like gold. That was the wisdom, John, rather than me. Right. But I think it's like, it's always going to be, it's never going to be perfect, right? Whatever you're doing, whoever you're working for, it's never perfect. But, take the good stuff. And on the diversity of the team, the diversity of manager, even that person who's got, in your opinion, low EQ, has probably got some other fantastic traits you can learn and take from.
Yeah.
And, and respect, even out of some of the managers I didn't enjoy working for, I still learned different things from them and still use those skills that I've been able to pick up.
Yeah. Brilliant answer.
Good. Okay. Well, actually, congratulations, chaps. I think we got through to some pretty robust and concise answers there. On to the next question. This one centers around change. So, organizational change takes its form in different ways. Sometimes it's evolutionary. Sometimes, there's a fundamental, could be a restructure, through to, I guess, sometimes it's as much about a redesign of an organization, let's say. And I guess the question here is actually, if you had a choice around driving through change, and I would say that, so it's planned rather than actually sudden foisted upon you. Would you do that in a structured one-hit manner, or would you almost do it in a subversive, gradual way, knowing that as a leader, you had an end goal that you wanted to get to, but it could take you longer to get to that point?
That's a great. There was
Chris.
a question in there, Lee. There was a question in there. Like, longest question. Can we make the answer any shorter than the question? I mean, any change done well needs to be managed through the people, right? And led through the people, right? So, rather than run towards, to quote Sir Jim Radcliffe, right? We don't want to run towards the wrong answer. We want to walk towards the right answer. And that means fundamentally including people on that journey, right? So, real basics here that people in leadership positions should follow are those like fantastic principles around like cultural transformation from like the Heath brothers. So it's over there next to like the Marshmallow Man on the bookcase, or Cotter with Leading Change and Accelerate, or Simon Sinek and Colouring in the Why. Yeah. If you're always micromanaging the what and the how and shoving stuff through, you're not really leading, you're just managing the task. And the leader needs to create the passion, the vision, the purpose, the stepping back, getting everybody to buy in where we're going, and actually having a say in where are we going, and therefore why we're doing this will make sense. Yeah. And go slower to go faster. And it doesn't have to take forever, but it should be deliberate and intentional, 100%, to get people behind the why.
Wow. Go slow to go faster.
Like that. It's I agree with you, Chris. I think getting people on board, that sort of subversive approach, if you like, of just ticking things along in the background to get to where you want to get to, but not necessarily the organisation of the function, understanding the why, I think is a definite and risky approach again, because it's like I say, is everybody on board where you want to go? How are you getting that change through? How are you driving it? Are people then going to push back further because they don't understand the change? I think the why is critical. I really like that point, Chris, on that. I think the other difficulty with any change in that, I'm in fact talking about this at the moment with potential client. The other difficulty with change is that people have a bias to not change.
Human nature.
People don't. Yeah, we don't like change, and it's in whatever form. Even if we've chosen that change, we don't always like it in there. And I think there's there's a value in understanding why that, when you're going through a transformation, there's a value in understanding why individuals don't like that and addressing it and hitting it a little bit. And again, we did one of the parts of the Canvas program we run and workshops that we run is going beyond the status quo. Not in the form of denim jackets and singing "Rocking All Over the World," but in the way of moving into change. When
I'm getting fashion tips off of you two, I know. Actually, that's all right. You don't like what I'm wearing? That pleases me. That's good. That's good. I don't mind that. Keep going, Lee.
Thank you. But is that piece of actually, that bias that people hold towards not wanting to change? Why is that? What drives that? And to get people to understand that in a group environment where people can therefore air their concerns, air their worries about it, air their thoughts about the excitement of what it could bring as well, but with a structure around it to be able to support that thought process and taking people to understand why we need to go beyond the status quo. How do we start to get there as a unit? How can we all make steps? For me, I think is the right way to approach it. It's not an easy, I think to your point, Chris, it's not an easy way to approach it, I don't think, because it can feel a little slower as you're starting to get people on board. I think once you do, the acceleration then will be much faster in there. And the other, and I actually said this to a coachee the other day, actually, the other piece with change, when you're in that change process, that really, in a completely different context, really helped me, was going through the coaching program. In fact, the one that we were on, John, the Ride the Wave, and with Lucy and Sonia, that we've talked about, Chris, quite a lot as well, is me having an understanding of that Kubler-Ross curve, or what's also the grief curve in certain instances. But that whole change curve, if you will go through each part of that change curve as an individual, of feeling like it's a great opportunity, then feeling the why me, why am I going through this change, then almost the low aspect of it, then the excitement of what might be next, and then you may come back again to the lowness and the why me and why is this happening. But at time, I found really valuable just knowing that curve existed and being able to say to myself at times, I'm on this part of the curve of this change. There's a big change happening here. And I feel like this, and that's okay, because I'm just going through that cycle of the change process. Sorry, that's a really long-winded way of not answering the question directly.
No, you've given a lot of context to what Chris is saying as well. So it's really helpful. I think one of the fascinating things from my observation as well is, and are going to be, I guess, less academic and insightful than either of you two, is that I believe that people make this assumption they when it comes to change, that actually the impact and that human behavior is the same through the organization. But my perspective is actually the more senior the person, the greater impact that has. It almost creates like this glue that makes that transition and creates that sense of fear even greater. And I find that in equal parts fascinating as well as frustrating, because sometimes when you're going through that change, you want to be spending more time actually moving forward and working with the whole organization. But the reality is you're spending more time with the senior guys getting that belief in order to make sure that they become your prophets, etc. So it seems a bit, to me, a strange concept, but actually you've got to put those hard yards in at the outset. Otherwise it just becomes, it just slows you down,
Oh, 100%, John. You've got to get that, spend the time, the hard yards, building that coalition across the organisation, within the people impacted, but also the wider culture across the organisation or the stakeholders or the client base, whatever it may be. I mean, that's like a key part and requires care and time. And that's where all those EQ listening kind of like skills are. But what's interesting is that rather than like pushing the change, is to kind of get people to understand what's not working, to really get them to feed in what their needs are and what needs to happen, then actually the solutions and the change usually has a good fit and a good match. But there tends to be quite an emphasis to quote your earlier in the question, right, was pushing stuff through. Pushing stuff through is definitely going to create resistance. It's not inclusive behavior. Actually that coalition build needs to be very mindful and near the beginning, right? And then playing back, then you're matching the change to what the needs of the organization and those teams are, and using their language in the communication. And even better, they're then advocates of it and actually driving it themselves on the right side of the seesaw. Yeah. So this is and depends where they are on that curve individually, Lee, right? As well. Yeah, definitely.
I think something you said there, Chris, as well. I think that piece of getting those, if it's leaders that you're trying to engage at the start, getting those leaders to understand the why, back to what you said, Chris. Some of this, a little bit of what, I don't remember Vince, again, let's go back to Vince again, he's like our phantom of knowledge at the moment, isn't he? But you talked about difficult conversations in a way. When you start that difficult conversation, you know what the outcome is that you want to get to.
Yeah.
State that up front to set the expectation of where you want to get to. And I think it's similar in this, is we're going to have this open conversation, but we need what we need to get to is this element of change, because this is why it's needed. This is where we need to head. Now let's go through that process. And I think ultimately, to your point, Chris, is then if you can get that team on board and they feel part of it and therefore they take ownership for it and they own then the change aspect of it, then you'll see the acceleration, then you'll see that cascade. It's, I think back to change in HSBC when we were there was that much change at times that I think the people further down the pecking order, for want of a better word, would sit there and going, what does it mean? Why are we doing it? Is this going to change anything? And skepticism all the time.
Yeah.
And probably never saw the actual outcome value of it, possibly because it wasn't actually owned at the various levels to make the change in the right way. Or certainly, like I say, the why wasn't always there with understanding what are we doing this for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. So, wow. Blimey. Any last words of wisdom, Chris? Or are you all out of them?
Next. Let's do the next one.
Okay, this one's a bit more fun. I think that's a good wrap up, and it's interesting. Just going through that conversation there, that the questions, whilst completely different in terms of the interconnectivity between the subject matter of emotional intelligence, right through to difficult conversations, and then into change, that the interconnectivities and the tool sets, etc., are there's a lot of commonality in terms of the levers you're pulling on in order to achieve that. So, right, okay. I like this question. Can you give us a memorable? Can you give us a memorable tip related to a movie? I have no clue where Chris is going to go with this one. He's probably got a standby ready piece of memorabilia to reinforce his point and everything.
I was just thinking that.
That means thanks, John. That means I'm in the box seat. That question then first.
No, I can. Okay. While you're thinking about it, I can go with one if mine's not really a movie. So
no,
those you
no. Answer the question, John. You're definitely not.
Does Ted Lasso count as it is?
You beat me to it. You beat me to it.
Well, there you go. 2-on-1, Lee. We can
again. Movie. No, right. So I'm going to go first. You guys are going to answer the question. All right. Our listeners have asked for a movie, right? So movie it is. All right. Oh God. Right. I better come up with a decent answer then. Right. Here we go. All right, so best teams I was part of, right? Like 100% did like three things really, really well. They would play to win, which means they'd be like brave and courageous and kind of ask questions and do all this stuff. And they would be fair to each other, and they would be fair to everybody in the organisation, outside the organisation. If they said they'd do something, they would do it. If they needed to work hard in a short space of time to get something done, they would. But in the long run, they need to have a really good work-life balance. And then more than anything, they need to have fun. It's the magic dust that held it all together. So my tip is really around the first one of those three, and it's around being brave. Okay, so what do we mean by brave? And this kind of comes back to our first question earlier today, which was around emotional intelligent and robot managers or tricky managers and all this kind of stuff. So if we go back to Jaws, 1976, right? My tip out of that movie is when Brody is off the back of the orca and he's throwing chum into the sea, and he's the one shoveling this shit. You come and shovel this shit into the water, and a shark pops out of the water. He goes white as a sheet, gets up, walks into the thing, and says, "We're gonna need a bigger boat."
One of the best quotes ever.
That is when he should have been brave, right? He should have been brave. They would have gone back, really lent on Quint, gone back, got a bigger boat, and came back. That's real bravery. Speaking up at the right time when you see the problem straight away, rather than seeing one of the team get eaten, somebody else has been smashed up in a cage, and you have a lucky shot, boom, and the shark dies, right? So that's not bravery, that's stupidity. So my tip for people to be brave related to a movie is when you see the shark, ask for help and do something about it.
Get a bigger boat. It could have been a much shorter movie as well if you got a bigger boat and killed it.
It's a magic movie, that. It is magic. It would have been shorter, yeah. I love that movie. It's fantastic. Right?
I love
That's
that.
my tip from the movie.
Jesus.
Bravery. Like, what is bravery? There you go. Right, chaps. No Ted Lasso.
Jesus.
Who's next?
Oh dear, come on, Lee, follow that. I mean, I'm struggling with.
I'm struggling. I really am with this. I'm not going to say I'm not a film buff. I love films, actually. I'm just trying to think of great tips that have come from film. I must admit, I was going to default to Ted Lasso because I think that's just brilliant with regard to the whole messages that come out of there anyway. But I'll take your buzzer, Chris, and I'll adhere to it.
Well, I'll tell you, but seeing as it's an unofficial edition, I will ask you a question though of the entire Ted Lasso series, which is your favourite quote that he has said? Albeit we're not answering a question here, we're just having a slight digression, Chris.
Oh, this is like stalling big time. You could just go ask another question. Go, who's got right? So let's change the question. We're going to change the question. Right. Who's got a fantastic tip off of Ted Lasso? Lee.
Henry can edit this together so it's seamless.
No, keep it all in, Lee. Keep it all in, everybody. Right, come on.
Come on then, Lee.
Dear.
What's your Ted Lasso quote?
Ted Lasso, I can't quote anything particularly, but the whole principle of his. What I love in that changing room setup is the environment he creates, but the thing that always stands out is his "Believe" poster above the door. And the bit that it rings true is in that final series. Well, I say final series. Hopefully, there's another one. But when it's been ripped up, and Nate comes back and puts it back together and sticks it back on the wall in these little pieces. But I think that whole principle of that's a group of completely disconnected people at times when he first comes in, but bring them together with that constant message on the wall all the time that by the end of it they're all bought into was brilliant. But I love everything about that program.
So my one because I love everything about that program as well. We have a bit of a love in here, Chris. You can sit on the sidelines if you like, But
I love that show, John.
with your
But
jaws,
I'll leave you two to it. Off you go.
So he's playing darts in the pub to win a bet, and at the end of the match, he's just about to throw his final arrows. And he says a quote from Walt Whitman, which is "Be curious, not judgmental." And then he tells a story about basically saying you should have asked the questions about how I know to play darts or not, blah blah blah. But yeah, I just think that it's short, concise, and impactful in terms of it. You can carry that into every part of your personal work life or whatever. So it's, but yeah, I have to say that in terms of my memories are sieve. In terms of don't have a bibliographic mind like Chris that I can recall apart from James Bond quotes, but they're probably not that inspirational and translating into the work environment, really, are they? So
I don't know.
What's your Ted Lasso moment?
They might have been in 1974 or something, mightn't they?
oh dear.
Oh dear.
Go on, Chris. Go on, Chris. We'll give you a chance now because we've changed the question. Is there a favourite Ted Lasso quote you'd like to share with the group?
Is there a favourite Ted Lasso quote? Oh, not a quote, just more around the whole principle around that of somebody putting the culture kind of like first, right? And that is just hugely important, right? So actually, it doesn't matter if they lose, but it matters they do it in the right way. And actually, long term, that's why they come back and Nate sticks that sign back together, because they do feel supported, right? And that's where long-term success comes from, and all the stuff we talk about on here around psychological safety, etc. So it is a fantastic show all about culture, right? And that can actually start from one person, and it can. Yeah, and then that can spiral and it can grow. It's like ripples in a pond.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris, for wrapping up our slightly diverted question. You've done us proud.
And well done on the film one. The only one to answer the film part of it. I'm still racking my brains. I keep thinking about sport underdog films, so I love those films, but it's like I can't think of a quote from them at all. But I love that aspect of them. But yeah,
not even Dodgeball, the underdog story. You could have used that. There you go.
Yeah.
Damn. That's a pretty shocking movie. So please, listeners,
right,
ask more movie questions, just so I can see their faces, please.
They're dumbstruck faces where they go, what?
Oh dear. Right. Last question before we wrap up for today's podcast, chaps. This one is, where's the podcast going?
I wonder where that listener wants it to go.
Stunned silence. So shall I give my 2 penneth worth first?
Go on.
So we started out the podcast with ironically, quite a narrow aim in terms of what we wanted to achieve. And it's probably fair to say, and I'll speak for probably the three of us here, that as we've evolved the podcast, this has turned in as much to being a learning vehicle for all of us, both technically and in terms of assisting us in our work roles, in sort of coaching side of things. But it's as much in some ways it's a tool in terms of friendship and collaboration and just having fun, really, first and foremost. And I think we've learned a lot about ourselves and each other. And in some ways, that's become the overriding trait that I think we individually enjoy doing this every week. And I think we're very fortunate now to have the opportunity to have some fantastic guests that we can come along. And the longer we do it, it feels like the subjects come to us rather than us having to make lists up of what we want to do. And now the guys are going to tell me I'm completely wrong.
I hate it myself. It's the bane of my week. No, I think the social aspect of it. And actually, I think I said before, I didn't. It wasn't that I didn't want to do it. I was probably scared about doing it initially when we first did it, and didn't know what to expect. But I look forward to doing it now because it's as much a learning piece to you, John. It's as much a social engagement for me now, in that it's a great opportunity for the three of us to catch up, talk in the sessions, talk outside the sessions as well. But it's become as much as a social vehicle as it has for anything else, really. Where's it going? I've seen I watched the Stick to Football podcast, and they're currently on a tour of Europe, I think, around stadiums and sort of venues. I'm hoping we get to that stage. So we'll go and sit in some local theatres with obviously 2 or 3 fans in there asking us questions.
Yeah. Munich Beer Festival. We could have our own bench there, couldn't we?
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I'd love it just to carry on as it is. If people still want to listen to it, if we still are providing some value, and I think the key with me is continuing to get some excellent guests on, because they are. Hopefully, they provide something different for the listeners, but for me and for us, I think they provide some fantastic conversation and learning.
Chris,
This is a very welcome addition to my life, this podcast, and I'm extremely grateful to be doing it with you guys, my amigos, and for anyone who listens in. Just is a really special thing that I'm very grateful for and very proud of. In terms of where do I want this to go, I'd like us to embrace some of those things that just mentioned earlier. Because we're brave, we can be braver still, right? In terms of what we talk about, the people we reach out to, the quality of the guests can continue to be built and to get stronger and stronger. And I think we can do that. So I think we can be braver. I think, it's been a lot more fun doing this and a lot less structured. So I'd love to see the podcast continuing to be fun and engaging. And if I could ask for like one thing, I guess it would be that hopefully we can get a bit more connected to the audience and they can get a bit more connected to us. So I'd love to see a bit more engagement between the audience and us on a more regular basis. So I think us having these questions has been a great idea, and that's really good. But anyone out there who wants to ask us stuff or whatever, please drop us a direct message, like in the LinkedIn or in like on any one of the podcast links and stuff, or directly to us. And we'd love to hear from you, right? But where do I want it to go? I want this to live and want this to breathe. Where that's going to go, we don't know, but we're going to do a bit of Star Trek and boldly go there.
Boldly go
there, then, Lee.
boldly.
Yes.
Boldly go. I'm a little slow.
Well, on that bombshell, we'll boldly go and say thank you for listening to the Just About Managing podcast. Please do find us, as always, follow, like on YouTube now, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. I've been John Lloyd. He's been Lee Smith. He's been Chris Dingle. We'll speak to you soon. Thanks for listening to Just About Managing. To stay up to date with new episodes, remember to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and discover what comes next on our LinkedIn page.